Well, thanks so very much for having me. And for those of you online, I hope you can see me. I can't see a camera. If I bob out about the room, just let me know. And really, I'm very new, fairly new to Boston. I'm actually not new because I was born here, but I've lived most of my life in Europe. I continue to work in Europe, so I run the Teachable AI Experience team in the Microsoft Cambridge UK lab. We are a multidisciplinary team who's really trying to drive innovation in human-centered machine learning with a real focus on inclusion. So I'll just introduce a bit about myself since I'm new to this community. I'm hoping this is going to spark new conversations, new reasons to connect before I get into some work that we are up to at the moment. We've done a lot of work with machine learning researchers. Half of our team is machine learning, but we work with machine learning teams across Microsoft to think about how can they think differently about the work that they do to be more human-centered. We work very much with communities. We've done a lot of work with citizen design teams and other ways of bringing people deeply into the process, not as participants, but really part of the teams that we work with, and thinking about the kind of skills that they can gain in that process. I also have two wonderful children, both of them who are disabled. So I have very daily reminders of it's really not enough, even though it's really hard work. I know it's hard work. Product teams tell me it every day. It's hard work to make it work for 90% of people. Come on, it's enough. It's not enough. It's got to work for 100% of people, and we can't have any compromises about that. So as I said, I moved here about 18 months ago, and I'm really excited to meet more of the community and the people here. Let's get our mice in all the right orders. There we go. So this is a vision I have. I hope it's a vision that some of you in this room share, and it's about we need to do no AI about us without us. And that sounds great, but actually it's not so simple. How do we start building AI models that value and utilize community perspectives throughout the whole of the AI pipeline? Not just at the beginning, what should we build? Not just at the end, did we get it right? But all the way from beginning to end. And how do we need to shift the kinds of machine learning we do to make that viable? That's a pretty big goal. I think I can spend my whole career doing that, so at least I know what I'm supposed to do for my life. So that's good. But I'm going to share with you one small chip into that, which is the work we've been doing around community libraries and the tools that we've created to engage communities in improving their cultural representation in AI media generation models. Now, we focused on media generation because media plays such a pivotal role in shaping public perception and all kinds of knock-on societal implications for educational opportunities, the ability to be in employment, and even access for older adults to the community and to social care. So throughout our whole lives, how we're perceived in the media is often how we get responded to. And let me just take an example, if that's not already abundantly clear. So one of the disability communities that's often least represented is non-speaking autistics. Now, if we regularly would see non-speaking autistics using letterboards, spelling in education, we would probably see a lot more of them in education rather than the continual lawsuits we see at the moment for them to get access to education and not be labeled as cognitively impaired. So these things are really pivotal in opening up the doors for different communities. And now, AI media generation is happening. It's happening in a really big and really fast way. I mean, all of us know Gen AI is coming and it's bulldozed us in all kind of directions. But AI media generation is being rapidly adopted by businesses, by individuals, because people think of it and it really is a really nice free alternative to photographs, stock imagery, and other kinds of media imagery that we need. And I thought it was pretty shocking to discover that in 2025, 34 million images were being generated every single day. So unbelievable numbers that are happening. And it's not just things that we're finding in people's presentations or in sort of day-to-day work, but we also see that the media have leaned in really heavily to AI-generated media. Cosmopolitan was one of the first to provide their first AI-generated cover image in 2022. That was just 4 years ago. We've had the first AI-generated video advert in the NBA playoffs last June. So this is moving really, really quickly. But unfortunately, maybe not surprisingly to some people in this room, the representation of people with disabilities in Gen AI is often poor, and sometimes it's downright offensive and harmful. So we see things like erasure of disability, we see all kinds of strange biases, difficulty with replicating assistive devices that people might use, all kinds of bizarre things like infantilization, mystification, and things like that. So this is in some way not very surprising because disability representation has been historically really poor within the media as it is. And so we can say, well, the data's not really there, communities haven't really had an opportunity to really negotiate what those should be. So, but given the speed and uptake of AI-generated media, we could either say, oh, we'll just let that erasure continue, let the stereotypes be, or we could say, look, this is a great time to start to think about how we could change the representation of people with disabilities in the media, whether it be media, textbooks, fashion, whatever you like, simply by making AI-generated images have a positive representation of people with disabilities. That's going to scale as this technology scales. So here is the moment where we can decisively make change in ways that have been difficult before. Now, part of this challenge is, it's a data challenge in some regards. There's not a lot of data that represents people with disabilities well. But our argument is collecting data is not enough. We really need to know what is the preferred representation of any given community if we're going to be successful in any kind of downstream efforts in model development. So if we don't know what success is, we're not going to be able to get there. So that's really critical. And it's been really interesting, when we started this work about a year and a half ago, not a single state-of-the-art model could produce, for example, a blind guide cane. We can do that now. And actually, very interestingly enough, some of these models do it extremely well, and you get a person, and they've got a cane, and they're walking across the road. No matter what prompt you put in, you get a person with a cane walking across the road. And so we've improved a little bit, but actually, is that the image that we want? And who wants that image? When we were working with our blind organization in Kenya, they said, walking across the road, our roads don't look like that to start with. And what we would really like is to show that people in Kenya, blind people in Kenya, have access to education. They have access to state-of-the-art technology for that education. They have access to employment, because that's not what people believe. And we want people to see that, we want to show that. So it's not enough to be correct or error-free. We need to have a diversity of images, and we need to have communities that are deciding what are those things that really matter in the conversation about how people want to be seen in the world. And so I have to admit, as someone who works at Microsoft, take a gulp of water there, there really are some things that we get wrong that we should really just get right. But my representation is just not one of those things. I don't think there's anyone at Microsoft who can or should be deciding what is the preferred representation of a community, even if they're part of that community, because one person is not a community, one person cannot make that decision. So we're going to do a little exercise just in case to let this sink in a bit. I'm hoping I don't have too many bird watchers in the room. Anyone who's part of the bird watching community? Oh, good choice on my part then. Great, so we have 3 images up here of bird watching. Only one of these images is a good image of bird watching. On the first image we have two colorful birds sitting on a branch. On the second image, we have a small bird sitting on someone's hand. And in the third image, we have a bird feeding young in a nest. Which one of these is a good representation of the bird-watching community? Who thinks number 1? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 hands. Who thinks number 2? 1, 2, 3, 3 hands. Number 3? Oh, a lot I can't even count. Okay. Well, here you go. It's number 1. So this is the one of just 2 birds. It's considered a good bird watching because photos should be taken in the bird's natural habitat without distressing the animals. Number 2 is bad because you shouldn't be handling birds. And number 3 is bad because you shouldn't be around bird nests when they're feeding their young because you're distressing the birds. So unless you're an expert in bird watching, you would have no idea. And often sometimes we think we have a good idea until we actually get into the details, and then we have no idea. And even if we had a good idea, even if we were an expert in bird watching, we are just one person. We are not the collective voice of the bird watching community that's making decisions about where the ethical boundaries of bird watching are. Right, so that's my argument. We need disability communities, or this is actually applicable to any culture that you want to define as a community. We need them to define their preferred representation. But it's not really obvious when you start to say that. It's like, well, how can a layperson communicate that preferred representation to an AI model so that the AI model learns effectively to do what the community would like them to do? Opa, that was an exciting, there we go. Do not use the mouse. So our main aim in the work I'm going to share today was how can we help communities get involved into the AI development process through a tool that we built called the Community Library Creator, to help them define their preferred representation through their advocacy organizations, and then put that into some sort of AI interpretable form. And I'm going to walk you through 3 phases. As an HCI audience, I'll walk you through some of the design decisions. There, as you know, for anyone working in this space, there are always a million of them. So feel free to note them down for ones you don't know, don't agree with, and we can debate at the end. So in phase 1, what we really want communities to do is define good representation. We chose to use a very visual, image-led approach. This is different than other attempts where people have asked people to describe what their culture should look like. We found that in trying to get people to describe things, they said, we're an independent people. That's great. What does independent look like? Because we're generating images, we're generating video. We need that in a format that's going to make sense to the models and the way that they're working. So we asked project leads to start by assembling a photo pin board of 10 images that represented their community. Sorry, my mouse is really getting excited on its own. And then we asked them some reflective questions about these images. Why is this a good representation of your community? And then we use that to then develop what we call a prompt caption, something that describes the image, but doesn't describe and say, oh, there's a clock and there's a this and that, but really describes the parts of the image that are really key to representational, showing of representation. And then it goes here, yeah. We then use this metaphor to expand out. After they started to develop different themes of things that were important to them, and education might have been important for some communities. Family and sort of mixed families were really important. Oh man, exciting! Come on, let's keep it to one thing. So then we asked them to develop a magazine activity, where they had to think about, if I was going to be a magazine, if I was going to be in the front cover of something, what would be that first image that would show our community? And what would be the other sort of feature images that were critical to the way that people wanted to be seen? So then we asked communities to go out, because this was not a process that we wanted researchers involved in from beginning to end, go out to their communities and really work with their communities to negotiate any kind of contestedness. We would expect identity in all forms to be contested. Communities are not necessarily all members going to agree what that should be, but communities do have structures within them to make those collective decisions. We worked with quite a number of communities, and they came up with all kinds of different ways to engage with their communities. Some of them took cameras and went out all across the country and the area where their communities were, and really set up the kinds of photos that those community members cared about. Others brought community members towards them, and they had these kinds of workshops. Some of them used the kinds of magazines as starting points to talk to the communities, what's here, what's missing. And it was really interesting, some of the ways that contestedness came out. No community came back with what they started with in anything similar once they'd been out to the community, so that they, as community leads, were not good proxies for the whole of the community. So the community was pretty critical. And they reported back some pretty interesting discussions. So for example, again, quite a number of our organizations were based in Kenya. And in this context, there were real tensions between the urban living Kenyans and the farmers. The urban ones said, well, we don't want to be represented as farmers because everybody thinks everyone in Kenya farms. We don't farm. But then they said, well, but this is a big part of our community. We can't just leave them out. They exist too. So all these kinds of negotiations going on within the community say, well, what is a representation that reflects enough of all of us that we can feel that this is part of our community that we are seeing. Right, so once they had done this, they'd set out this sort of initial set of themes. They then went out and curated a data set of about 400 photographic images within the themes that they had come up with. So things, I love it, it goes completely on its own. And within those themes, they then started, some of them crowdsourced imagery, some of them took that imagery, some of them had imagery. And one of the things that we did once they had all that imagery was to then go away and say, get them to annotate their images. Why does that imagery matter? So I spoke a little bit about telling us why that matters in the prompt caption. We also asked them to create highlights for the image. So those are sort of people, could be animals, could be objects that are critical to that, representing that community. You would think that's pretty easy, right? Why what can be so hard about that? Well, it was amazing how many iterations we had to go through to get the kind of data that actually would make sense to machine learning models. This was not obvious from the way when people first started. And this is an early example of one of the Short Stature Society of Kenya. And this is an image of a person with dwarfism in Kenya who's working as a politician. She has an adapted chair, an adapted desk, and we asked them, what is important about this image? And you'll see they put bounding boxes. They bounded box the flag and the clock, and I think there's a coat rack. But they didn't bound box the person or the adaptive furniture, which are the things that you would think would signal that this is a person with dwarfism. And we saw this consistently across communities. They had just no idea what they were trying to share with the AI system and how they needed to identify that for that to make sense. So yeah, there's a lot of very specific annotation guidelines in there to get people thinking about what they need and then getting the kind of data that's going to make sense to models. So once we've done that, that takes us into phase 3. So you could say, okay, we've got a data set, we're done, right? Throw it at the model. Well, how do we know it works? And how do we know we're getting the model going in the right direction? So for us, data and evaluation are inextricably paired. We cannot separate these two things. So what we asked our community leads to do was we showed them AI-generated images. Those images were generated from their pairs within the community library. So if they had a library, this example here, this was a caption that said a photo of a secondary school girl of short stature confidently delivering a class presentation while standing on a stepping stool, demonstrating inclusive learning, thank you, in a classroom environment. So this was the prompt that would have labeled the original image. We then used that to generate images with different models, and then we asked them to label those in a discrete manner between very bad and very good, so on a 5-point scale. This particular one, which is an image of as the prompt said, a person with short stature giving a presentation. She is on a stepping stool, but it's been labeled very bad. And the reasons given is that actually this is not the kind of safe stepping stool you would have. This one is just very tall, has no steps up. You cannot fold it away, you cannot safely use it. Also, this person looks much younger than her classmates, so she's been very much being infantilized. So this was determined to be a bad representation. If you were outside the community, you might say, but there's no error here, right? And this is one of the things that we were really trying to get at with representation, is that a lot of what we think about now in terms of safety is like, let's get rid of the errors. But actually we're saying, let's get to good representation. Let's try and get metrics and an understanding of what good is, and not just say we need to get rid of the things that are really, really horrendous. And that's what these are done. And then what we do with these is to create an automated evaluation metric, which we call the community score, which then allows us to test the alignment of any new AI-generated image to see how aligned is it to that particular community library. And maybe this is a good point to think a little bit more about what we mean by communities. So I've used this word very broadly. So in this case, what we mean by communities is a set of people, a bounded set of people that are represented by some kind of organization. That could be a specific disability organization, that could be a particular national organization, but it's a set of people that have a specific set of membership. So we don't go on and say, my exciting computer that's doing its own thing, we don't go and say, well, you know, we have blindness. It's our community, because it's not. There's sets of people all over the world who might have very different views about how they want to be represented because of their various intersections, maybe where they are in the world, maybe religion, or it could be any kinds of other viewpoints that sort of intersect with those kinds of identities. So we just define a community as however they define themselves, as long as they have an advocacy organization that defines their set of memberships about them. And the scores that we create are specific, they're community specific. There's no sense of a cultural identity score in any ways. This is just an example of what people are looking at, an image on screen, which is a set of images of some poor representations that have been filtered out by these community scores, and some better representations that have been let through by them. So these community scores can be used for filtering, they can be used for judging models, they can be used for a whole range of tasks. We've started to use them for steering models as well, so they can be used in the training process, not just the evaluation process. Right, so let me draw all of that together. And the three things that we get in any one community library is a definition, a very structured definition of preferred representation that can be manipulated and used in a range of different ways in different kinds of machine learning setups. We get AI interpretable data. What I mean by that is we have richly annotated data that's really well suited for training AI models, but it can also be used in post-training contexts or a whole range of contexts. We ourselves have been using it in pre-training. And then we have the community scores, or a way to evaluate, are we reaching this preferred representation? So those are our community libraries. We built them with three NGOs and validated this whole process, and we're in the process of running this right now with about 15 more organizations. And then we are using that data to train the Microsoft AI image models. For those of you who might have been at CHI, if you didn't catch it, there's a paper out as well on this, which I'll point to at the end. Right, just to bring some of these thoughts to a close. So community libraries, you can think of it as a novel approach for enabling productive participation in with non-machine learning experts in AI data practices and evaluation. We really very specifically took this positive orientation. We did not want to just define harm. We did not want to get rid of the errors. We wanted to get to good representation for people with disabilities. And as I said, any of this is extensible to any kind of community and cultural representation. We were very much supporting communities in negotiating their social identities and trying to preserve the plurality of different communities, rather than flattening things out to, okay, here are the 6 communities that Microsoft commits to, or here are the 6 things that the EU says you have to do, right? To really give space to say, if we're going to include communities, we need to be able to include communities as they self-define. And finally, it was really important for us to not stop at data, but to have scalable evaluations that shows the data that we're putting in works and makes sense. And again, I didn't mention this, but for communities, this is really important. They want to know, they did all that really hard work, and they want to know it works. They keep coming back to say, is it working now? Is it working now? You know, and you could just send them to Red Team, or you could say, yeah, actually, we can show you that it works on your community library. So that's community libraries, but I want to use that as a community of thinkers to sort of pose some of these bigger problems about how people and machine learning systems work together. And these are 3 very general ones, but hopefully you can start conversations as we move forward. One of the things about working with communities, and I know our product team people love us, they're like, 400 images for communities, we can't do anything with that. Yeah, we can. You gotta think hard, you gotta think differently. You can do a lot with that. But there's this notion that we can't do anything without scale of data. But to me, my response to them is like, could you just make machine learning more efficient? We know it's possible, please get on with it. So there's a lot missing in us thinking about we just need to keep scaling humans to our AI systems rather than saying we need to scale our AI systems to what human people can do. We also have to think about what are the data markets? We know that data markets are developing with commercial data. Are we thinking about how community data, government data, other kinds of data are part of those data markets? And how are we making sure that they are efficient? As I said, do we include evaluations in data? At the moment, those data markets are data. Like, what is data and what do those markets need to look like for people to know they're gonna work well and to want to participate in them? And maybe the last one, which connects a little bit onto more data efficient machine learning, which is just, I've been amazed as we've moved so quickly in the Gen AI period, how much we are happy to bypass the amount of work that we're asking people to do and not think at all about the role of people. And I'm gonna depart a minute from community libraries for, I think, my favorite story of the year, which was that I was speaking with an engineering team in Redmond with Microsoft's main headquarters. And they said to me, we have real problems as